Tonight's event is with Jim Adams, who's the author of Liam's Lady, and Cynthia Kortman Westphal, who is the chair of U of M's musical theater department. So they're going to have a conversation about the book, then Jim is going to read an excerpt, and then we're going to do a Q&A. During the Q&A, I'll come around with a microphone because we are live streaming. That way it picks up the questions. Afterwards, there will be books for sale and a signing, so please help me welcome them.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be sitting here today with Jim Adams, the brilliant and irreverent mind behind Liam's Lady. Have we all seen this brilliant cover? I love it. This is a novel that is as sharp and hilarious as it is unpredictable. Set against the backdrop of Wisconsin in the 1990s, this book takes us into the world of Liam, a successful novelist who is now battling writer's block, navigating relationship mishaps, and encountering all sorts of chaos. All with a biting, irreverent sense of humor that makes it impossible to put down. So today we're going to dive into the story behind the book, where the idea came from, the real-life inspirations woven throughout, and what it was like to write and edit a novel that, in the words of one reviewer, features exceptional use of dialogue that brings to life memorable characters who are funny, poignant, and relatable. There was also a review that talked about how much swearing there was in the book, but we won't worry about that at the moment. We'll also talk about the upcoming audiobook, the sequel that is in the works, and of course, the biggest question of all, who is Liam's Lady? But we'll get to that, maybe. So let's get into it. Let's start at the very beginning, shall we? This is your first novel.
It is.
So where did the idea for both the book that you were going to write a novel in the first place, that's a pretty big aspiration. So where did the idea come from that, first of all, I'm going to write a novel, second of all, it's going to be a comedy, and third of all, it's going to star this man named Liam?
That covers a lot of territory.
It does cover a lot of territory.
Thinking back, I think the seed for Liam's Lady was planted when I was a junior in high school.
So just 5 years ago or so.
Five
okay.
or so. I went to see a movie, Tom Jones, with Albert Finney, a young Albert Finney. And it really did set off, besides a lot of laughter. It was my first experience with the genre that's known as picaresque novels. A picaresque novel, I will read you the definition of a picaresque novel in case you're not familiar with it. It's a comic literary mode in which the hero or heroine, often either an innocent or conversely a rogue or a scoundrel, undergoes a series of loosely connected misadventures. That's Tom Jones, which was written in the 18th century. That just stuck with me in a lot of ways. It was also kind of semi-erotic for a high school junior with a date with his girlfriend at the time. So at any rate, that stuck with me. And really, it was a matter of when I got to college and I started learning more about the genre. I was an English major. I ended up concentrating on 20th century. But I learned first about the 18th century novels, which were basically Tom Jones, Moll Flanders, and Tristram Shandy. And they were extraordinary, particularly to an 18-year-old kid in the 1960s. It was amazing to learn that these things had actually been written several hundred years before. Then I found Catch-22, Joe Heller, which brought it into the 20th century, brought it into black humor. That became my go-to. I read almost anything that was black humor when I was in college. I concentrated in it. John Barth, J.P. Donlevy, that was my thing. And so after we went through all that, I decided that maybe I would write a novel. It was going to be funny, and it was going to be about college, because I was in college. It was a thing to do. Didn't happen. I went to law school. I did a lot more reading, but I did a lot more law reading than I did other reading. And as they say, the law is a jealous mistress. She took me away for a lot of years. And it wasn't, so there was always in the back of my mind, someday I'm going to write this book. Come the 1990s, I moved to Traverse City for 10 years. I had a little more time on my hands. I started doing some writing. I took a writing seminar up there. I wrote a story, my first fiction ever. I submitted it all over the place like an idiot, and received a whole lot of rejections, which I have retained.
Wow. Are there any particularly excellent rejections that you want to share?
Most of them were at those.
There's got to be a choice one in there somewhere.
There was one. There was one that actually kept me going. After I was rejected by the New Yorker, by the Atlantic, all of the good stuff, long afterwards, I got a rejection from the Kansas Quarterly. Kansas Quarterly is Kansas State University. And it was...
Can you show that? It's
I'm
such
going
a
to
great...
show you this. This is the actual, this is a photocopy of the actual document. Had the standard issue rejection, but someone had taken the time to write on it. And what they wrote was, sorry about the long wait. It was a long time before I saw this. We don't feel that we can find space for the man who loved the presidents. That tells you something about why it was rejected everywhere. But we did like the straightforward, unpretentious prose. That got me. That kept me working. Not for long, because I ended up back in Detroit practicing law again. But what happened was I spent 10 years in Traverse City. And I spent 10 years in Traverse City with a divorce in the middle. And I spent 10 years in Traverse City in a dating scene that was not to be believed.
There's a line in the book, I believe, give me one moment here, where a character says to Liam, "You've dated everyone in town." And
Yes.
Liam's response, I believe, was actually a real life
I believe
response.
this really happened. And I can tell you where it happened. Happened at the Trillium Restaurant in the Grand Traverse Resort. This lady looked at me and said, so I hear you've dated everyone in town. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, I think you're number 31. And as the book says, it was a short evening.
It was a short evening.
But,
So how else did your time in Traverse City in the 90s influence this book?
oh, it influenced it a ton. I mean, it really was because I was that befuddled guy. I mean, Liam is not me. Liam's a 6'5" Irish-American guy who swears a lot. I'm
And
not
smokes.
6'5". I'm not 6'5". I'm not Irish-American. But at any rate, but it was, it really, it was one of the kind of things where when I was always thinking about writing a college story, it was because all the things that happened, all the crazy things that happened in college. Well, there were all these crazy things that happened. The book is not autobiographical, but there's a lot there.
There's some homage
There are some homages.
to a handful of...
I can tell you, the book is set. The book's set outside of Madison, Wisconsin. But I lived in Traverse City for 10 years. There are some homages. There is a resort, a northern resort, a northern Wisconsin resort, called Windward in the book. There is a northern Michigan resort called Watervale, which is just outside of Traverse City, near Frankfort. Old family resort, where our family went. for a lot of years, and some of our family still goes. So I needed an old resort. There was a model. In the book, there's a restaurant and bar called the Porterhouse. Traverse City, DJ Kelly's in the 1990s. The owner, Dan Kelly, good guy. The nice restaurant, really a lovely bar. And that was the bar where the entire singles scene descended every day after work. Every day after work. So when you see references in the book, yeah, that's kind of an homage.
Yeah.
There is an odd character in the book who you'll run across. Her name is Vera.
First of all, I like that you're saying there's an odd character,
There's,
because if you've read the book, there are a handful of odd characters.
There's a lot of odd characters.
There's
in
a
the book.
lot of really vivid, fabulous characters.
To take a little break, there is one actual live in the book, I won't say person, the dog. The dog is named Lady in the book. My dog was named Lady. Actually, was named Ladybug. But that one's real. You got to have something real. And there is one character in the book who is just dead normal. One character in the book. Her name's Helen. Nothing, no pretension, nothing, no oddity. She just stands out like a sore thumb compared with all the other odd people. So yeah,
But we might argue that something's going on with Helen for her to fall for Liam.
that's a whole nother subject, and has caused more than one reader to say, "Oh, come on, really?" But yes.
Well, let's sidetrack for a moment while we're
Yeah.
talking about this, because you have told me that your initial impulse for writing this book was, I think you said, a vacuous comedy with no redeeming value.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I set out to write a book that had no merit whatsoever.
And what you wrote actually was a character that goes through quite a lot of growth.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue learns quite a lot of empathy along the way, maybe for the first time, really
He
becomes
doesn't
very...
know what it is.
Yeah, he probably can't name it.
No.
But it is what it is. There's a beautiful line where when he picks up Lady the dog, or on his way to picking up Lady the dog, it's just 2 words. He says, unconditional love,
Yeah.
which is not something that someone with no redeeming value, no
Yeah,
redeeming
except
quality.
it was the dog. Except it was the dog.
Yes,
He didn't know how to translate that into something else.
but he clearly has a heart.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
in other words, yes, you set out to maybe write something that was all dark comedy and no redeeming value, but I think you actually ended up writing something with a lot of heart and a character that went through quite a lot of growth.
Well, thank you.
How do you respond to that?
I don't know. I don't know. One of my former law partners, who is far away from here, read the book right before it was published, and her response was, "This guy's an insufferable prick." And I respected that, but I have to say that he really isn't, and maybe that's because I wrote him, and I wrote, I get all the stuff that he goes through, so I didn't view him as this guy, but there are people who say I can't get into this guy. He's a mess. Well, yeah, he's a mess, but he's in therapy, and he's in therapy big time. I will say, and we'll talk about editing later, but one of the issues that my editor had to begin with was, she said, I'm reading these therapy sessions, and I'm having a hard time with them because they really sound like cross-examination.
Have you been to therapy?
And that was my question. I said, have you been to therapy? And she said, no. I said, well, guess what? Guess what? You know, she said, well, he doesn't want to answer any questions. I said, of course he doesn't want to answer any questions, because he doesn't want to sound like what he is. And it's a game. It's a game. And the therapist knows him very well. The therapist doesn't buy any of it. And so there's this dynamic.
Which is why you go to a therapist.
Which is why you go to a
To call
therapist.
you out on the stuff
Yeah.
you don't want to
Yeah.
talk about and admit.
Yeah, yeah. And so she draws it out of him. He plays games. But so what? So what?
And now this therapist, Sharon, is
Yes.
based even a little bit, isn't it, on someone that, again, that you knew by a little?
Yeah,
Are we able to disclose that a little bit?
yeah, yeah, I don't know.
Or not? We can move on.
Well, you know, that was, of course, that was the other thing. I mean, the therapist was, someone I knew in college. We were friends, we were acquaintances. When I was in Traverse City, I went through some things, and she was there. So, the original draft of the book said they're old friends. My editor had a fit over that. Well, professionally, that can't be, which leads into some of the other issues with the editing process.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay,
So you finished this book,
I did, as you know.
as I do. Yeah. I was one of the lucky people to get to read early versions of the book.
Cynthia was after Nas, the #1 first reader, beta reader.
I was very honored.
Yeah.
So you had finished this book. You
Yes.
sort of shopped around to find, do you want to talk a little bit about how you even get an editor in the first
Well,
place, and then who you
yeah.
found to begin with?
Yeah, I wrote the book, and the original draft was 172,000 words, which if you use the normal numbers in the industry, works out to 700 pages. It was a bit on the long side. And
Just for
basically,
context, where is it now? Where does it land now?
89,000 is where it landed,
How many pages do we have?
342.
342. Okay, so wow, so you trimmed it in half.
I did. Well, I did some of it, and she did a lot of it. And so, you know, I took it, I knew it was too long, and I didn't know if it was any good. And so I had friends in Traverse City who knew a publisher up there who doesn't do standard publishing, but does self-published works and basically hires out to. So I sent it to her, and she said, you know, this is actually pretty good. It needs a ton of work. It might be good enough to get a Big Five
You want
contract.
to explain what a Big Five means?
Big Five is the Big Five publishers, the ones you shoot for. But you got to get an agent to get a Big Five publisher, and good luck with that. But we can help you. And so I ended up hiring one of their editors, who really did an extraordinarily good job overall. We had issues, which I've learned now is very common in the industry. You have issues with your editor. I mean, I've watched interviews with John Irving, with John Updike, who both said, I hate it when I get the markups back. It just ticks me off. And I can tell you it's true. You get them back, and it really makes you mad. And then you pout for a while. Sometimes you pout for a couple weeks, sometimes you pout for a couple months. And then you look at it again and say, well, I suppose I can do some of this stuff. But she did some amazing cuts to begin with, and I will give you a little example of something that came out of it. This is totally totally not in the book. But it's an example. She took characters out. Some of them really ticked me off that she took them out, but she took them out. She took out characters, she took out plot lines. One of the characters she took out, and should have come out, was a lady by the name of Sally Snyder. Now, I'm just going to give you a little hint of Sally. Sally lived up the street and had been stalking Liam for some time. She was divorced. She was needy. She had a kid. No, not just a kid, a young kid. A freckle-faced 8-year-old boy who wanted a father. Any father. Desperately. She checked virtually every box on his list of never in a million years flags. Now, I can tell you that this one came from reality, in a way. Just to give you a sense of who Sally was. I'll set it up. Liam's sitting in his office on a Sunday. He's trying to read the New York Times. Deeply engrossed in the arts and leisure section, the voice took a while to register. Well, what did you think? Without putting the paper down, he decided to write it out and ignore the sound. It happened again. What did you think, Liam? Still clutching the paper, he spoke tentatively from behind it. About what? Maybe it would go away. The brownies, silly. Did you like my brownies? Too late. The voice registered and he was trapped. Damn it, Sally Snyder. Life was so completely unfair. Oh, Sally, they were very good. He lied. He had thrown them out without tasting them. Slowly, resignedly, he lowered the paper. There she was, blocking the doorway and any chance of escape. Her kid was slightly behind her, holding her hand. Oh, I'm so glad. Tommy helped me. He thought you would enjoy a treat, and I certainly couldn't deny him the joy of making something for his favorite guy. Liam's stomach started to churn as he scrambled for words that would satisfy her and yet move her back out of sight. He needn't have worried about speaking as she launched into her signature nerve-driven, blistering cadence that permitted no interruption or response. This I have to take a deep breath for. Tommy said we got to go to the grocery and get everything we need because, you know, I never have enough baking supplies in my kitchen, and he knew that I would freak out if I had to bake something so special on my own, and because he loves you and appreciates having you nearby, so we went to the store, and he wanted to push the cart, and how could I deny him that pleasure? So we didn't move very quickly, and he got upset when I told him to hurry up and go into the baking aisle. And at first, we thought they were out of sugar, but silly me, I wasn't looking in the right place. And Tommy, God bless him, said, Mother, here it is over here. And I felt so silly. And then we found a mix, but Tommy didn't think mix was good enough for you. So we got all the ingredients I could think of that we might need. After we got home, we laughed and laughed at how that went. But then we got down to business and worked to make sure the brownies were perfect. And we think they were, don't you? Liam figured she just plain ran out of air. And shaking his head, snapped, breathe. Sally turned beet red, the nervous sweat by now pouring off her forehead. Chagrined, she dropped her head and said, I'm sorry, I did it again, didn't I? Now, Sally could boo-hoo with the best of them, often shaking convulsively and requiring that someone, here Liam, hug her to let her know it was really okay, which of course it was not.
So that entire thing got cut.
Oh, yes.
In fact, 350 pages got cut.
350 pages got cut. You know.
Are there any other characters you want to share that will not see the light of day unless you share them with us here?
No, you know, there was the only one was there was a homeless guy, and he was a drug addict, and no one wanted him around, and Liam took care of him. The only reason that I feel bad that this guy, whose name was Joey, didn't make it to the book was that showed early on a side of Liam that you didn't get when you took him away. Because here he was actually taking care of this guy. You know, and this guy came, this is another homage to Traverse City. There's an early bird diner in the book. There is the omelet shop in downtown Traverse City, for any of you who've been there. It's this little hole-in-the-wall breakfast place. And I used to go there before work and sit and have an early breakfast. And they took care of the homeless people. You know, if someone was homeless, they'd bring them in, they'd set them up with breakfast, they'd set them up with coffee, took care of them, and that was the homage that Joey represented. So, yeah, there were things that I would have liked to have kept in.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, the other thing is, when you rip a character and a plot line, it's a significant one, out of a book, it leaves gaping holes that you gotta fill somehow, and you gotta change things around, and make the book work. And believe me, there were big holes.
Yeah.
And not only were there big holes, but I couldn't fill them because I wasn't given the words to do that.
Yeah.
We had to cut. So it was a tough thing. The other problem with the editing process was that, and what finally drove a wedge between me and that editor was humor.
Yeah.
For those of you who've read the book, the book itself is off kilter. And the humor is more in line with the John Irving than it is with something else. And my editor, God bless her, really thought that Jane Austen was a good model for me. And she wasn't. And at the end of the day, and I finally told her this as I was letting her go, I said, you wanted me, and let's talk in terms of movies. So, you wanted Notting Hill. Nice, sweet, funny movie. I gave you Sideways. And that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it really is a matter of, humor is timing, it's all kinds of things, and you either have it or you don't have it. And she had a lot of talents, and did a tremendous job on this, but she'd miss the humor. I mean, I'd have a rim shot to a single word, and she'd want to put descriptors on the word.
Oh, I find comedy to be one of the hardest things. So,
Oh, it is.
I work with actors all the time, and comedy is I find so much harder than drama. Can you give us an example of a sentence or one of these rim shot words
I could,
where
but I can't.
you gave one to me the other day?
I know, and I can't.
Oh, you can't say it? You can't? Okay, all right, then we shall not, but
No,
it's
we-
good. It was a
we-
good
We
example.
won't do that. There's a particular line in the book that I would just assume not.
We could say though, when you talk about a rim shot,
Yeah,
meaning
it's a beat.
it's a beat, it's a single beat, it's
Yeah.
a one word, maybe
Yeah.
one syllable, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, rim shot.
Yes,
And she wanted da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da.
yes, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a rhythm thing, it's a,
And without the beat,
yeah,
without the beat.
yeah.
And so that's just something that is so critical.
Yeah.
The other thing that I can say, and then we should probably move on a little bit, this book had 3 beginnings.
Is the beginning what you're going to read to us? Is that
The
the
beginning that I'm
excerpt?
going to read is the final.
Great. So
Yeah.
maybe, can you describe a little bit of the evolution that the
Yeah.
beginning went through, and then we
Yeah.
can have you read the beginning?
The beginning of the first draft was too much narrative, which I understood. It was also, Liam was depressed, and there was a real theme of depression in it. And the publisher said, this is a comedy. Why this? And so she handed me off to the editor, and the editor said, well, I think what you really need is you need to rewrite the beginning, and I want to see live action, and I want to, there's this, that you'll know when I read this, that Liam is hung up on this woman, Sylvia. And she said, I want live action with Sylvia. I want you to show, and after we'll return to this after I read it, so I can explain a little bit more. But anyway, so she had me write this totally off the wall beginning. That was live action in the bookstore at a poetry reading, and there were things going on, and Sylvia was bigger than life, and as I was later told, gauche, which is okay, but at any rate, So I totally rewrote this, and I worked on it and worked on it and worked on it with my editor. And she signed it off. I mean, this book was going into copy edit. It was going to be done. And we had lunch with the editor in Traverse City at this point, right, just as I'm ready to start submitting it to agents. And she says to me, well, is the book ready to read yet? I said, I think so, because your editor just signed off on it. And she said, okay, send it to me. So I sent it to her, and 2 weeks later, I got a cryptic email from her that said, I got to talk to you about the beginning. I hated it. I hated the beginning. This woman is ghost. She's an alcoholic, and I can't believe that Liam would be with her, so I don't get it. And I didn't read any further. When as a writer you see that, your first inclination is, I'm screwed. I am just screwed. And I contacted the editor and I said, hey, this book's dead on arrival. And this, I did exactly what you wanted, but it's dead. And that's when everything sort of came apart. So I ended up terminating the editor. Most of the work had been done. I rewrote the beginning again, and that's what I ended up submitting, and that's what got published. And would you like me to read that now?
I would love for you to read that beginning.
Hopefully I will do Liam justice. Yeah. It's Liam. Out, for God's sake, get out. Liam O'Connor ran, stretching his legs further than seemed humanly possible, pounding the pavement to a mantra recited at the top of his lungs. People were used to seeing this gangly 6'5" man loping along, lost in his thoughts, but now those thoughts were being broadcast for all to take in. Out of my life, out of my head, go. The curious glances became more obvious. Jesus Christ, Liam thought. What is this fucking power she has over me? I can't shake it. I miss her. I got to find out what happened. Maybe she lost my number. Maybe she's trying to reach out. Maybe. Liam hatched a plan. Surely Sharon would have the answers. Sharon was his longtime shrink, and her office was close by. I'll just casually stop by. Yeah, she'll tell me what to do. He picked up his pace like a horse nearing the stable. Sharon answered the doorbell through a crackling intercom. Yes? Sharon, Liam. Silence. Finally, more crackling. Liam, I'm with a patient. Oh, that wasn't in the plan. How long will you be? I have 20 minutes left in this session. Is this an emergency? Define emergency. Oh, never mind. How long? Can you come back in a half hour? I can squeeze you in, but I have other patients this afternoon. After literally running around the block for the half hour, Liam presented himself at Sharon's door, panting and out of breath. Is this good? Ushering Liam into the office, Sharon shook her head. You don't look so good, my friend. It's been what? At least a couple months since your last session. And by the way, it helps if you schedule them in advance. Just saying, what's going on? What's obviously something isn't quite right. I met a woman. Liam, you meet women all the time, don't you? I've always figured there was a waiting list out there somewhere. Anything unusual this time? I came home and she was gone. She's totally disappeared. I can't find her, can't reach her, and no one will tell me why or what's going on. It's driving me nuts, and I can't get her out of my head. Help me. Whoa. Came home? There's a lot going on there, so she's gone. You go through women like Santa goes through milk and cookies. This isn't like you. I have so many questions. Let's start from the beginning. What's her name and who is she? Sylvia. She's an Amtrak agent. Works baggage at the Dell station. It's a bit rough around the edges. She drinks Pabst. Sharon exhaled. Okay, so she's out of your usual lane. I take it she's not the ex-wife of a doctor or dentist then. Cute, Sharon. No, she's not one of the ladies at the Porterhouse bar. So, do you want me to tell you the whole story? Not really. Dance began. Well, okay. You do recall therapy is a two-way street, you know? A dialogue. I ask questions. You answer. You give your thoughts. I help you work through them. Sound familiar? It's really embarrassing, Sharon. Kind of sounds like it. Let's take it one piece at a time. How and where did you meet her? Liam took a deep breath, sat back, and considered how best to tell the story. Sylvia had shown up innocently enough, a casual introduction by a friend at a dinner party. Absolutely not his type, but nevertheless intriguing. He was a writer of some note, author of a best-selling novel and owner of a small bookstore near Madison, Wisconsin, called The Owl's Eyes. His bookstore catered to and attracted the more literate townsfolk and visitors, which was strike one against Sylvia and vice versa. Sylvia hung out in blue-collar bars and never heard of, let alone patronized, The Owl's Eyes. Rather plain in appearance and demeanor, but not unattractive, she had a spark in her eyes and an ease in her manner that attracted Liam and made him a surprisingly easy mark. I met her at a dinner party. She was someone's cousin or something. That's it? Is there anything that attracted you to her? She wasn't from here. She looked different. She acted different. Her eyes. She made me laugh. I don't know. She said she'd just broken up with her boyfriend. What happened at the end of the dinner party? Nothing. I went home. Then what happened? I called her the next day and asked her out. I had tickets to a poetry reading, so I asked her to go. A poetry reading. Liam looked surprised. Yeah, why not? Sharon shrugged. Tell me more. We agreed that she would meet me at my house, which was close to the venue, so she wouldn't have to go home first, and I wouldn't have to travel to pick her up. Did that happen? Yes. Sharon looked at her watch. Was there anything striking about when she arrived? Anything that caught your attention? Liam thought for a moment. Well, she had on an unusual t-shirt. Unusual. Yes, but keep in mind she's a railroad worker. And? Well, it was a bright red shirt with a large locomotive coming out of a tunnel on the front. That's it? No, there was an Amtrak logo on the back. Well, I suppose that makes sense. So that's it? No. Oh, something else. Well, yes, but I didn't see it until later. That's okay. What'd you see later? She had a tattoo. A tattoo? Yes, just below her belly button. Sharon sighed. Okay, I'll bite. What was it? It said, all aboard.
So how did, what's my question? My question is,
What question can there be?
what can follow that rim shot? My question is, when you get a comment from someone saying, I couldn't get through the beginning, or I didn't find this funny, or whatever, how do you keep going? And how did you kind of overcome, I mean, for Liam, there were quite a few things that had to happen for him to get over the writer's block and get working again.
Yeah,
I'm
I
curious,
think-
what was that for you?
For me, the comment was, first, it pissed me off. Secondly, it really threw me, because I had been working on this for, we had 2 years worth of editing on this baby. So the new beginning, which was Sylvia drunk at the poetry reading, and really out of control. I will say that what it was, it didn't totally get me. I mean, I did it for the editor. I did it because I was told that that's what I needed to do. I didn't do it for me, because this dialogue between Liam and Sharon is at the heart of the book. Okay, that was gone. It was missing. And I get it that you needed live action. This is live action. Yeah. Okay, and in the beginning I didn't have that. It was all reporting. Mm-hmm. But I was really angry with the editor, for one thing, because now I'm being told this book's going to go nowhere. Yeah. Then I got a peculiar follow-up from the publisher that said, oh, by the way, I realized what it is that bothered me. And what's that? And she said, my father was an alcoholic and he was abusive. And the portrayal of Sylvia as an alcoholic got me. And so that made sense. I still wasn't happy, but that made sense. And again, I said to her, look, because she said, after she said that, she said, the original beginning was what attracted me to your writing. Mm-hmm. I said, well, good, you could have told me that a while ago. But so that's why, I was just like, you know what? There's too much work in this book to drop it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to just take that and throw it away. and I'm going to start the beginning over again, and try to get back to where I was. So that's what I did. And as it turns out, that's what worked. That's what sold the book.
So now I want to save some time for questions here, but I have a couple more. Tell us a little bit, now you've finished this book.
Yeah.
You've now, how far along are you on a sequel? Are you able to share anything about that?
Sequel is, sequel's about 3/4 done. It is different. It's still funny, but it's written in, and I can't say too much, but it's in 4 parts, covering 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And the 4 parts are by 4 different voices.
Is
So
Liam
it's-
one of the voices?
Liam's one of the voices.
Is Liam's lady one of the voices?
I can't tell you too much.
I was hoping maybe that would get you to tell us who
I
Liam's
can-
lady is.
Well, there is no answer to who's Liam's lady. That was, you might have noted.
But do you know the answer somewhere deep inside?
I have thoughts.
Okay,
I
all
have
right.
thoughts. You know, the obvious answer is it's the dog. The dog's name's Lady. It's Liam's lady. That's how I started this book, with a dog. It must be. That's one answer.
If you've read the book, you know there are
There are a lot of
more answers.
Yeah, there's more answers. You know, someone said to me, a good friend of mine from high school said, "Geez, you wrote this whole book and you got one guy in there and all these women." And I said, "Yeah, it kind of turned out that way." So if you want to see who's Liam's lady, there's a lot of candidates.
Yeah,
Some of them aren't so good.
yeah. But they're all really interesting and a lot of
Yeah.
fun to read about.
I mean, I will tell you, I could make an argument. This isn't the answer, but I could make a very strong argument that it's Sharon. Because the relationship between Liam and his therapist is really how Liam's mind works. I mean, that's your vision into how his head is, what's going on in his head, is through Sharon.
Yeah.
Without her, you wouldn't have that.
I have I have my own personal theory.
Yeah.
But I dare not share it for that. I'm worried that it'll give too much away in the book. But I
Yeah.
will say it's not the romantic lead.
Uh-huh.
And it's not the dog, and it's not the therapist. There's another character that
Jeremy?
not Jeremy. So I want to save a little time for questions. If anyone has any questions for Jim Adams.
Yes.
Yeah, I really liked the book, and my question is, how did you decide on the last line? I could say what the line is.
Don't say it. Don't say it. That was one of those. Yeah, it's a great line, and it was one of those things. One of the things that I have heard multiple times from authors that I respect is never start a book without knowing how it's going to finish. And that is maybe the best advice you can get. I knew where the book was going. I knew the last scene of the book. Shortly, not from the very beginning, because I wasn't good enough and I was too new to the business, but it came pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Where it was gonna head, and I think it's critical. And there were times when I thought I can tell you that before I reached that conclusion, I was going to end it with something like something really cheesy, like having the book, having the end of the book be someone reading his new book, and having it be the beginning of this book.
Oh.
What I just read.
Oh, that's really clever, though.
Yeah, it's clever, but it wasn't good enough.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why I switched.
Oh, I love that. Great question. What other questions do we have?
Uh-oh.
I won't ask about whether you thought your granddaughter might be sitting in the room while you're reading some of this. But do you want to talk a little bit about like your process and the focus that writing required? Like, what did you leave behind while you were?
I left just about everything behind. I started writing this. I won't spend much time on this, but I first started writing that college book, and I did it by researching and doing character studies and doing outlines and doing all these things. And what I wrote was terrible. I got a couple chapters into it and it was awful. So what I decided to do, actually this book came out of me writing. I took 43 days and got up every morning and wrote a poem. I gave myself like 10 minutes to write a poem with no forethought at all, to see if I could improvise. And I realized I could. And so then I decided to start with the old saw, write a paragraph, paragraph every day, write a page a day. And I literally started writing the book that way. And that became then an hour a day, then it became 2 hours, then it became a full day's work. And that's how it got done. I wrote the 172,000 odd words in 9 months. Then, like I said, it took 2 years to edit it.
Wow. And as someone who has seen a couple of the poems back from that 43-day, you should probably consider publishing those in a book as well, because they're really lovely. Are there other questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks. When we talked before, you had said you stopped reading for a period of
Yes.
time. And I'm wondering if you ever got to a point where you wrote something and you took it back because it seemed you recognized that it was too close to something that you'd read or the style.
I think that happens from time to time, and I think I probably did. But I literally, I cold stopped. And I have read almost nothing, which makes me not very, all these writers, you see them and they know so much, and they're totally into everything that's being written now. I don't know what's being written now, because I don't read. I'm starting to again, but again, I'm 1/4 of a book away from finishing the sequel, and when I'm done with the sequel, maybe.
Then comes the editing.
Then comes
And the
editing.
rewrites.
Well, in fairness to myself, I know a lot more about what I'm doing now than I did the first time around. This book is the target on the book is 80,000 words, and I'm probably gonna hit 90 or 95, so I'm gonna have to drop 15,000 words maybe, which I can do. So it's not gonna come out of the chute in as bad a shape. I will tell you, when I wrote the first draft, and you know this, when I wrote the first draft, I didn't even space out dialogue. Everything was in paragraphs. I had paragraphs filled with dialogue because I thought that was kind of an interesting way to do it. And the first thing the editor said, no, you're gonna do this right.
Maybe for your fourth book,
Yeah.
when you've earned the right
Well,
to
yeah, I have not earned the right.
have a
And
really
just like
interesting device.
At first I thought when it was the 170,000 words, I said, well, that's about the same as Catch-22, And then someone said, you didn't earn the right to write Catch-22.
Other questions?
Yes, Tom. Now I'm in trouble.
So before I get to the question, an observation, as I'm
Yes.
sitting here, and I hadn't really noticed this before, but as you're sitting there with your dress shirt, kind of slouched back a little bit, dark rimmed glasses, well coiffed hair, and then I look up at the book, I kind of see, and then I look over at Naz with her dark curly hair. Granted, she has glasses on, but I'm starting to think, maybe therapist.
If we look in your
soul.
fridge, will we see a whole lot of Paps?
But that leads to my question. Going back to your statement of the type of book this is, would you classify Liam as more of an innocent or a rogue?
It's an interesting question. a really interesting question, and I think he's a little bit of both. I know it is. I know it is. But I think that you know, to a lot of people reading it, he's a rogue, no question. But when you look at it in terms of, did he grow? Was he open to growth?
Well, was he open to
Well, I don't know if
growth,
he was
or
open to
was
growth.
it
It
sort
just
of
happened organically.
beaten into him due
it
to
was-
circumstances that kept happening?
That's part of it. That's part of it. I mean, it just, you know.
He finally became resigned to growth,
He
perhaps.
was resigned to growth. I mean, it was interesting. I mean, I loved the relationship between Liam and Sarah.
Yeah.
And speaking of homages,
That's who I thought Liam's lady was.
oh, well, it's possible.
Possible.
Sarah, you know, Sarah is an homage to Irving, to the prayer for Owen Meany. That's who Sarah came from.
When I saw the capital letters,
The capital
that's
letters.
what it makes me think of.
And
yeah.
it's funny. I watched an interview with Irving, and one of the people said, you know, are you going to read Owen Meany? And Owen Meany is a character in one of John Irving's books who speaks in capital letters. Everything that Owen Meany says is in capital letters. And Irving kind of looked around and he said, you know, I've often tried to imagine what Owen Meany sounds like. He says, I've got something in my head. And they said, what do you got? You know, and he did something that was, it's kind of a craggly voice, but it was like, you go, this is the guy, this is his character. Yeah. And I mean, I know what Sarah sounds like, you know, to me. Yeah. I mean, she's loud. She's loud. She has one volume. She's not Owen Meany. It's not the character at all,
Right,
but,
no, it's a very different character.
Very different character. But yeah.
Yeah.
So, did I answer the question?
Semi. Any more questions he can half answer for you?
Jim, I know we've talked about, I know you're excited about the audiobook coming out.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And you mentioned it before, but I was just curious, you know, you've written this book, you're working on the audiobook coming out, and I'm wondering if you have concerns as someone else is adding their voice to your story.
This is a really interesting example. The audiobook is being done, and for those of you who know him, it's being done by Malcolm Tulip. And Malcolm is a prophet at the U. Malcolm is like a world-renowned actor and comedian and all these things, director. Malcolm is English. He's a Brit. And it's interesting because when we talked about doing it, he said I can kind of get there to the American, but it's going to have Brit in it. What I have heard, when he went into the studio, he's Irish. He's doing Liam Irish. And it's interesting. It's different. I mean, I will say, it is totally different. Different than certainly what I read, certainly what was in my mind. But it's kind of cool. And I think, and that's what, you know, it really, it's a very good question, because Malcolm said to me, look, if you don't like it, tell me. But I think there's something to it. And Malcolm gets the characters. I mean, he really does. I mean, he does things that you know, and he said, I'm sorry if some of them sound alike. They really don't. Yeah. They really don't. So, yeah, that's and it would be the same no matter, you know, it's an Irish, that one's an obvious example. It's Irish, that's a totally different accent. But we had originally discussed having Julia Glander do it, who's an actress who we know very well, who is very good and would really give some drive to it. I mean, she's not a sweet type of, you know, so she would get the gravitas of the book, but that would be different. So, I don't know, whoever reads it is gonna be imprinted on people that listen to it. And so I don't know of anybody that I can say, this is Liam. I mean, it was funny when I was writing the book, we were playing with, well, if there's a movie, who's gonna play all these various
I'm dying
parts?
to ask that question.
Well, we were gonna have, who's the actor? We had, yeah, now they're too old because it's taken so long that none of them, we'd have to go to the next generation down to make it work. So,
So we don't have a movie star in mind yet for Liam. Who's an older actor who you would have thought?
Is he Scottish? Scots, red-haired, beard. Doggone it, I don't know.
We'll find
I'm
out.
drawing a
All
blank.
right, if any of you have ideas, let us know. We have time, I think, for one more question.
Okay, so you won't tell us how Sarah sounds to
Yes.
you. What does Sarah sound like from Malcolm?
Oh, what a good question.
She's loud. She's, what do you think, Naz?
I'm very emotional because listening to what he's done with her is magnificent. I love her. Magnificent. I don't even want to, I mean, I can kind of hear her in my head, but I love her. I'd rather you listen to it. Okay. Because it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah,
Oh, I love that.
he captures it. Again, it's different. It's just different. I mean, when you're writing something, you hear it. There's no question. And I know all these people. Sometimes I know them a little too well.
Yeah. When can you give us a projected timeline for when the audiobook will be out?
When Malcolm stops directing, he has a show that opens next week.
Next weekend,
Next
yes. Okay.
So he will be back in the studio. He had
Okay.
about half of it done over Christmas,
Okay.
and he's gonna redo the first few chapters. We had some discussion about a few things.
Okay. Okay, great.
He didn't have Sharon quite as dry as I would like her.
Got it. All right, well, we're looking forward to the audiobook. And thank you, all of you, for coming
Yes,
tonight.
thank
And
you.
thank you, Jim Adams, for this great book. Thank you so much.